contribution I'd like to add to today's conversation is that, in my opinion and my experience, one of the aspects of successful contractors is that they are both focused on their business and simultaneously paying close attention to changes in the market on both a micro and a macro level. And so I'd like to add a few questions that I think can focus that kind of awareness. You know, the first question is this: what does the playing field look like right now? All of us on this call have now witnessed 2 to 3 very, very different playing fields in the last 3 to 4 months. And the sheer rapidity of the change, right? The sheer speed at which things are changing mandates that we kind of up our game in that sense. Who are my main competitors? And by the way, that includes both traditional and non-traditional, because we've seen non-traditional competitors crawl out of the woodwork since social distancing began. What are their strengths, right? What are the insurgent competitors doing that make them particularly viable? At the same time, are there weaknesses that you can identify and potentially exploit? Sure. Second, what's the competition been up to? After COVID began, after social distancing, it felt like a little bit of a land grab to run toward the virtual online coaching space. And Coach Tom, I think, has done a masterful job of capitalizing on that. But if you think about the people that you do business with on a regular basis and the people that you compete against on a regular basis, you know, how have they changed the playing field in the last 6 months? Have they adopted e-commerce strategies? Have they moved to a virtual selling platform? Have they fully endorsed no contact selling and service calls? But if you look at the people that you do business with, what have they been doing, if anything? And by the way, that's a choice as well. Like, the answer may be hide under a rock and wait for this whole thing to pass over. That's a choice. But not having the answer to that choice exposes your own strategy to some potential liabilities that would otherwise be preventable. Have you lost any competitive advantage that you once had? And I think that this is an important, and it's a humbling question, but it's also a really direct question. The idea, for example, of selling online is not a new idea. And you may have looked at it and kept it at a distance, right? You may have just maintained that arm's length relationship with the concept, either because you didn't know what to do, or you didn't have the technology baked into your business to do so, or maybe you didn't have a great third-party partner to help you bridge that gap. But if that were the case, then COVID probably felt like you were running into a brick wall, and you have now spent months retooling and recapitalizing certain aspects of your business so that you can get back on the playing field. So the point of this question is this, right? If you had a very traditional business model up until a certain point, do you feel like you have successfully evolved through this crisis? And if you were really strongly positioned pre-crisis, if you felt like you had, for example, a deeply loyal fan base, or you had tons of referrals, or you had great web leads coming in, did that maintain its momentum, or did they falter, and do they now need to be retooled? What's around the corner? To me, this is a very compelling and perhaps the most important question. Today, for example, in the news in New York, Governor Cuomo suggested and is floating a trial committee out there that air conditioning spreads the coronavirus, right? And so we have to ask ourselves some big picture questions. What happens if our stock and trade, what happens to an industry that right now is considered an essential service, now is stigmatized as being one in which the products that we sell simply recirculate COVID-infected air? Now, is that an esoteric out there possibility? Yeah, but is it in the news? Definitely. Do people pay attention to those kinds of questions? You bet. So on a macro level, what are some of the bigger trends that we need to be thinking about, even though they might not be impacting us right now? But then below that, right, if you have great talent, are they happy? Are they secure? Are you profitable enough to provide the income and the perks needed so that they don't drift? What scares you most in the year ahead? And right now, given the pace at which COVID's unfolding in states like Texas and Arizona, what scares you most in the weeks ahead as certain states go back into a very aggressive lockdown mode? And if it scares you, what are you going to do about it? How will you mitigate that fear? Will you act on it? Will you sit on it? Will you contemplate and ruminate on it? But if you know the things that keep you up at night in your business, and if you know that those things are hitting us faster and more aggressively than they have in the past, you have to make a choice, right? And I think that circles directly back to what Tom was saying. The choice that you're going to make about the things that scare you may very well be your best strategy for survival.